B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Wednesday, August 30th, 2017. Interesting developments regarding the presidential pardon issued to Arizona's Maricopa County former sheriff, Joe Arpaio. Now, I thought I understood the pardon power of the president pretty well. It is generally unlimited. I think the president could write out a pardon on a napkin, and it would be legally valid. But interesting issues have surfaced related to this controversial pardon of Joe Arpaio. And there are two fronts that the pardon may be challenged on. First, the judge in federal court, Susan Bolton, who convicted Joe Arpaio of contempt of court, is telling the attorneys they can put aside the sentencing motions and documents that were being prepared for an upcoming hearing. But she did not throw out the conviction based solely on the request filed by Arpaio's lawyers for dismissal because of the pardon announced by President, so hard to say that, the Trumpster. Now, the issue here is that she has instructed the attorneys essentially to prove to her that she should grant the request to vacate the conviction because of the presidential pardon. That means that this is not a closed case. And attorneys are arguing that the issuance of a pardon that violates the Fifth Amendment's due process clause is suspect. Now, we got to be fair here that this is unprecedented territory. But it could lead to legal challenges that may force the U.S. Supreme Court to better define presidential pardon powers. So, because of the Fifth Amendment, which says that no one may be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, this conflicts with the basis for the conviction of Joe Arpaio, because he was violating the constitutional rights of a whole class of citizens in Maricopa County, Arizona. The argument is that the president cannot obviate the court's powers to enforce its orders when the constitutional rights of others are at stake. Quote, the president can't use the pardon power to immunize lawless officials from consequences for violating people's constitutional rights. That is a statement from Ron Fine, who has authored this challenge. He is the legal director of Free Speech for People. There's a larger concern. After repeatedly belittling and undermining judges verbally and on Twitter, President Trump is escalating his attack on the courts into concrete actions. That's a comment from Ian Bassin, executive director of Protect Democracy. He continued, his pardon and celebration of Joe Arpaio for ignoring a judicial order is a threat to our democracy and every citizen's rights and should not be allowed to stand. Now, I have to say that this is a seductive argument that feeds my bias. I'm outraged that the president issued this pardon for Joe Arpaio. But there's no clear precedent here that can tell us that this legal argument may hold water. And Fine says, while many pardons are controversial, we are unaware of any past example of a pardon to a public official for criminal contempt of court for violating a court order to stop a systematic practice of violating individuals' constitutional rights. So at issue here is not the right, the narrow issue of Trump's right to pardon Arpaio. It's that in doing so, this violates the constitutional rights of other people. Now, it may be moot as well because Arpaio is no longer the sheriff. Had he won re-election and was still in office, I think it might be a little bit different. Nevertheless, this is a creative argument, and I'm happy to see it move forward, and I want to credit Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post for airing this out. And Mr. Bassin, who we quoted a minute ago, added, Judge Bolton may want to see how the honorable lawyers of the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section respond personally in open court, themselves as officers of the bar who've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, to this blatant abuse of power by their boss. And you heard Trump, defend his pardon by saying that Joe Arpaio was just treated so unfairly, so unfairly. They brought this case right before the election, and he viewed it as all politics. Well, a former clerk, a clerk for the judge who presided over this case, the judge's name is Murray Snow, he wrote a piece that is an op-ed at the Post today. Andrew Case is his name, and he said, look, this guy is a conservative. He was very careful in his handling of the case. Joe Arpaio tried to deep-six some emails that showed racist conversations that were taking place that he was privy to or a part of. And the judge, while that was taken into evidence, he said that he didn't make his decision based on that because he considered that inflammatory. And you need to understand the background here. Back in 2007, Arpaio was sued alleging that his saturation patrols violated the Fourth Amendment because they involved stopping people for immigration status offenses, which are the exclusive jurisdiction of federal agencies, and also the Fourth Amendment because they only targeted Hispanics. And this man says when he started his clerkship, the case had been moved to the judge, Snow, who he was clerking for. He treated Arpaio exceptionally fairly throughout the trial. When the plaintiffs presented strong evidence that Arpaio's department mainly stopped Hispanics, Snow emphasized that the lawsuit could not prevail unless they also proved that that was Arpaio's intent. Then they couldn't find a bunch of these emails, and later they did find emails, not only the salacious ones that referred to Mexifornia driver's license, a picture of a man passed out drunk under the caption Mexican yoga, and similar ethnic slurs. Now, Snow issued a limited order before the trial, barring deputies from stopping people based on suspicion that they weren't legally present, and that was upheld on appeal by 3 judges who praised the Judge Snow decision. We applaud how the district court has expedited this sensitive case. After the trial, Judge Snow took 7 months to draft a careful, understated 142-page order with 2 key demands: to stop enforcing civil violations of federal immigration law and to stop detaining people based on race. And Arpaio not only flouted the order, but boasted publicly on TV that he wouldn't follow it. He was truly in contempt. He even sent deputies to stalk the judge's wife. He made gratuitous public insults. And so the claim that Arpaio was treated unfairly is not only false, it is the converse. That Arpaio acted with indifference, with arrogance, with contempt, and openly tried to intimidate the judge. He deserves what he got. In Syria, U.S. military fighters carried out airstrikes today to block a convoy of hundreds of Islamic State fighters that were heading to eastern Syria under a deal negotiated by Hezbollah. And this raises a number of important questions. Now, in some ways, I am sympathetic to the U.S. military that after fighting to vanquish the Islamic State, to see 300 of their male fighters accompanied by 300 women and children, riding in air-conditioned buses, being allowed to escape the combat zone, and being able to be transited to another part of Syria where they will join others who continue the fight for the Islamic State. Now, I don't support airstrikes that would just slaughter these men, and I also think that the U.S. has showed restraint because they know that women and children are traveling with these ISIS fighters. But fundamentally, they should be held as prisoners of war. Now, this is problematic as well because Trump would want to send them to Guantanamo. Bashar Assad would want to lock them up and torture them in Syria. And while I have little sympathy for some of the vicious people who are drawn to the Islamic State, I am humanitarian at my core. And I believe that if they have given up the fight, they should be treated as prisoners of war. And we need to figure out a way to honor the human side of that complex problem. Now the Iraqis are all pissed off. Prime Minister al-Abadi said that this was unacceptable to negotiate with the Islamic State, and clearly he's upset that they're going to be moved into position along the border with Iraq. Hezbollah said, hey, this is a fabulous deal. It's a great deal. It's a Trump deal. Because we recovered the bodies of several dead Hezbollah fighters and one Iranian military advisor who had been decapitated by the Islamic State earlier this month. And one of the ironies is that these militants are traveling across Syria in an air-conditioned convoy of buses that are from some sort of a travel service called Happy Journey. Doesn't make for the best optics. Benjamin Netanyahu once again revealed himself as a serial compulsive liar. Because yesterday he contradicted many of the statements he's made over the years, willingness to negotiate over settlements, willingness to pursue a two-state solution with the Palestinians. And in a speech he gave in the West Bank, which they refer to, of course, by the biblical names of Judea and Samaria, he said that these illegal settlements on occupied land are there for eternity. Now, that's not a negotiating position. And keep in mind that Crown Prince Jared Kushner, who's been an outspoken supporter of illegal settlements by Israelis on Palestinian land, just left the region after failed attempts to restart some sort of peace talks. So this is another poke in the eye to the U.S., and it shows that Netanyahu feels that he can control Trump, that Trump will continue to suck up to Israel for the domestic support he gets from AIPAC and other elements of our political communities, Democrat and Republican. And it just might be enough to piss Trump off and change the whole direction of things there. We'll have to see. Yesterday, I noted that Trump showed a little restraint, or maybe he was just preoccupied by his visit to Texas in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. But he didn't tweet a threat at North Korea after that missile, which landed. It overflew Japanese territory, but the map I saw on TV showed that they actually pretty skillfully targeted a flight path that landed in the Sea of Japan between the islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. And this indicates that it didn't actually quite overfly land of Japan, but it came perilously close. And, of course, we don't know if they can actually control it that way or if the trajectory might have been accidental. But Trump took to Twitter today. He said the U.S. has been talking to North Korea and paying them extortion money for 25 years. Talking is not the answer. Now, this is just kind of one of those kind of ambiguous threats that Trump likes to issue. In a formal statement, the White House yesterday said the world has received North Korea's latest message loud and clear. This regime has signaled its contempt for its neighbors, for all members of the United Nations. But what's interesting is Trump's tweet today was parried, I think that's the best way to say it, countered by Mad Dog Mattis, the defense secretary. Responding to questions about Trump's tweet, Mattis insisted that talking is the answer. He said, we're never out of diplomatic solutions. That was in a meeting with South Korean Defense Minister at the Pentagon today. Mattis added, we continue to work together. The minister and I share responsibility to provide for the protection of our nation, our populations, and our interests, which is what we are here to discuss today. Also last week, the White House National Security Advisor, General McMaster, flatly contradicted Trump's stance on Venezuela by stating that the U.S. had no plans for military action in our hemisphere. That's a bit of a relief. Meanwhile, the U.S. is basking in the glow of another successful missile defense test that most likely was rigged to produce this result. We ran a test on Wednesday off the coast of Hawaii, intercepted a medium-range ballistic missile, and this follows it's the second time that we've done this in the past month or two. But historically, we have staged these tests And I think we are really afraid that if we try to deploy the THAAD missile defense system that we've put in South Korea, or the Patriot missiles that we have sold to Japan, that we will be exposed as a paper tiger and a myth maker, and that's why I refer to it as missile defense. Also, Secretary Mattis is apparently in some ways defying the president's Twitter order that transgender individuals may not serve in the military in any capacity. What he's done is scheduled another 6-month delay by impaneling some so-called experts from the Pentagon, Homeland Security, who will provide advice and recommendations on the implementation of the president's direction. And Trump signed an order that gives Mattis wide discretion in determining whether those already in the armed forces may continue. But Mattis said, once the panel reports its recommendations and following my consultation, I will provide my advice to the president concerning implementation. So clearly this slows the process down while allowing the president to pander to his base and their fear of transgender people and their junk. And this leaves the status quo in place, at least for now. Today, Trump is traveling to Springfield, Missouri, where he is pumping his plan to cut taxes, specifically corporate taxes. And this flies in the face of the commitment to deficit reduction by Republicans who always use that as the excuse to block any spending plans that Barack Obama proposed. And they were planning to grease these tax cuts by using the savings from repealing Obamacare to, on paper, pay for these tax cuts. Well, they don't have that that fiction to use, but Trump is proceeding anyway. And there are two good pieces on this today. The Guardian points out that Trump's corporate tax plan will add trillions to the debt, estimated $3 to $7 trillion over a 10-year period. And when you ask, are these tax cuts necessary? Well, today it's being announced that the revised third quarter estimates for economic growth are going to hit 3%. Trump has claimed that he needs these tax cuts to jumpstart the economy because Obama fucked it up so much after the Republicans just about melted down the entire economy and international trade. And when you look at 92 publicly traded corporations that reported profits between 08 and 15, the effective rate they're currently paying is about 20%. And that is the rate that Trump is proposing to reduce the corporate tax to. And there are many companies that pay no tax at all. 100 of the Fortune 500 companies didn't pay taxes in 2015. And the effective rate on those that did pay taxes was 21.2%. But 30 companies in the Fortune 500 paid 6.9% effective tax rate, and 8 of them paid nothing or almost nothing. The CEOs of tax-evading companies get a payoff as well. The CEOs of 92 firms, the ones that saw the tax rate of less than 20% from 08 to 15, they got a pay increase of 18% over that period of time, while the other Fortune 500 companies, they got a raise of only 13%, and the people who work for those companies got a raise of only 4%. So it's a myth that corporate taxes are a burden and that they stall growth and prevent job creation. And in a piece at the New York Times, Patricia Cohen blows a bunch of holes in a lot of these hot air balloons, noting that when George W. Bush cut the rate for overseas profits held by American corporations back in 2004, well, the promise was that this would stimulate job growth and an expansion of the economy. More than $300 billion flowed back to the United States, but the companies used most of the money to pay shareholder dividends and to buy back stock. So Apple is the poster child here. and it offends me that I love their products so much and I hate their tax cheating policies. But we know that Apple has over $200 billion technically offshore. The money is actually held, we're told, at the Bank of New York. And Steve Rosenthal at Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center says these earnings are not trapped. They're not offshore. They're not even earnings. They're accounting gimmicks that allow earnings to be shifted abroad. And other experts note that a shortage of cash is not what is holding back companies from expanding, and that the arguments that we're going to hear are basically bullshit. My very senior California senator, 84-year-old Dianne Feinstein, is a bright and capable woman. In no way am I suggesting that she is senile or impaired in any way by her age. But she's way out of touch from California voters, as we experienced at the Commonwealth Club the other day. As she was interviewed by a friendly former member of Congress, Ellen Tauscher, she shocked the crowd when she declined to say that Trump should be impeached, warned the audience they should expect to deal with him for all 4 years of his term. And then she added, "The question is whether he can learn and change. If so, I believe he can be a good president." Now, I really have to question, after her years in Washington, after having to face the Bush administration and to suffer through being in the minority during the final years of the Obama administration, for her to say that really leads to questions about her judgment. She said, "We'll have to see if Trump can forget himself enough and have the type of empathy and direction the country needs." So, Dianne, she also dodged a question about whether she's going to run for re-election next year. She should settle that now and head for retirement. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Jerry Frescia, who enjoys life in Italy and checks in on the podcast, I think, almost every day. He just renewed his annual subscription. Martin Bilodeau, Anna Gordonier, Brian Massey. They all kick in $5 a month, and I appreciate it. I'd like you to join them. I need your help to sustain this. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click the menu button, pull it down, click Become a Subscriber. You go to the sign-up page, and in a couple of minutes, you can set up a subscription that fits your budget. Give me $50 for a new annual and a mailing address in the continental U.S., and you can choose among the bonus books on the sign-up page. And speaking of people being generous, a lot of people are touched by the upending of the lives of so many people in Texas, in Houston, Corpus Christi, and potentially in Louisiana over the next 48 hours. And I am pleased to see that many people are now aware that the Red Cross is about the worst place you can give money if you want to help people with the crisis that they face because of Hurricane Harvey. And Facebook has made a shift. They were partnering with the Red Cross around Hurricane Sandy and other disasters, but they have shifted to an outfit called the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. And I don't know much about this group, but they're saying, look, we're collecting money for the long term, for the reconstruction. So they're pointedly saying they're not going to provide water or shelter to the people afflicted by this in the near term. They're looking at long-term recovery. But I view the Red Cross as a fraud. We learned it in the 1989 earthquake here in San Francisco, where they raised hundreds of millions of dollars and had to be shamed into spending that money here. They wanted to bank it to use for the next disaster or who knows what. And that happened with Hurricane Sandy, and most egregiously following the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And ProPublica did an investigation. The headline read, "The Red Cross raised $500 million for Haiti and built 6 homes." And that was accurate. I'm happy to share another strong op-ed challenging the central narrative of Russiagate or the Trump-Russia scandal, the allegations that Russia hacked the DNC and gave the information to WikiLeaks in order to damage the campaign of Hillary Clinton. And a man named George Perry He spells it just like Robert Perry, but I'm pretty sure they're not related. George is a former state and federal prosecutor who practiced law in Philadelphia. And at the Philly Inquirer today, he published a really strong op-ed challenging Special Counsel Bob Mueller to examine the DNC server and to pursue the issues raised by the veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, Ray McGovern, Bill Binney, and many other people who I respect. And the article recaps the history of the claims that the FBI, didn't examine the server, the issues of how the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign immediately blamed Russia when the WikiLeaks releases started last June and July. And Perry says, since then, the mainstream media have created a climate of hysteria in which this unsubstantiated theory, that would be a conspiracy theory, has been conjured into accepted truth. This has resulted in investigations by Congress and a special counsel, and in their frenzied coverage, they have downplayed the very odd behavior of the DNC, which refused to turn over the server to either Homeland Security or the FBI. And he notes the credentials of Bill Binney and associates like Skip Folden, former manager of IBM's information technology, and the report that fundamentally provides technical evidence that contradicts the claim that the DNC servers were remotely hacked. And he raises a number of important questions. Why did James Comey and the FBI agree to an impotent, absurd, and self-defeating arrangement not to examine the server? And why to this day has this bizarre situation been allowed to continue? It's a very strong piece, and I encourage you to follow the link in the show file for today's podcast at peterbcollins.com. Trevor Tim, I almost said Trevor Noah. Trevor Tim is with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and he also writes op-eds for The Guardian. He issues a warning today, I've linked to it, that you have less than 24 hours to post your comments at the Federal Communications Commission website, fcc.gov, because the window is closing for comments on their proposals to gut net neutrality. And they're, Orwellianly, there, I can say that, calling this the Restoring Internet Freedom Act. So please do share your comments. I've already done so several times, but I know that they are hell-bent on changing the rules, and it's probably going to happen. A judge surprised Sarah Palin and has thrown out her defamation lawsuit against the New York Times over the editorial back in June, where they inaccurately did state that her TV commercials had used a gun sight crosshairs on Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. In fact, they used the crosshairs over her district, not over a picture of her face, but the judge said that the Times corrected its mistake and that while it may have been negligent, it was not intentional defamation, and she can go back to Wasilla. Ed Cunningham is my hero of the day. I don't follow football either at the college or professional level, but he is a seasoned commentator on ABC and ESPN, and he has resigned his position. He has quit because he can no longer watch football games and see the hits that come and the brain damage that he knows is killing some present and former players. And I applaud Ed Cunningham. This is a real ballsy move, a real statement of conscience, and it is so rare in media and professional sports that it deserves special mention. And finally today, I want to note that there is a bevy of Trump-loving people who are planning to run for the U.S. Senate in 2018. When I was in Michigan last week on vacation, I was taken aback to see a number of political yard signs that read Kid Rock for U.S. Senate. And I missed the announcement back in July when the rap/rock star who visited the White House with Sarah Palin and Ted Nugent and had a picture taken in front of Obama's portrait where they all, ridiculed him. Well, Kid Rock is apparently fairly serious. His name is Robert James Ritchie, And you can visit his website, kidrockforsenate.com. And he's candid. He says, well, I may just sell a bunch of T-shirts and other merchandise, and that'll be fine. I'm going to keep that money, and I have no apologies. But it's interesting. He defines himself as a hardline right-winger on fiscal issues and the military. But he says, I lean to the middle on social issues. I'm no fan of abortion, but it's not up to a man to tell a woman what to do. As an ordained minister, the Reverend Kid Rock, I missed that too. I don't look forward to marrying gay people, but I'm not opposed to it. Kid Rock testing the waters to challenge Democrat Debbie Stabenow in Michigan next year. Oh, and on his website he wrote, one thing is for sure. The Democrats are shatting in their pantaloons right now, and rightfully so. It's game on, and he left out some vowels from the word motherfuckers. Some people who are a little more restrained, they're not wild celebrities or people, provocative people like Kid Rock, are also lining up to run as Trump supporters. In Pennsylvania, Democrat Bob Casey, he's almost a Democrat, is going to face Lou Barletta, a Republican congressman who is a strong supporter of Trump. Trump has urged him to run, and Barletta has joined the race. Also, Rick Scott, a Trump supporter in Florida, the governor there, is going to challenge another moderate Democrat, Bill Nelson. He's so milquetoast that, gosh, very hard to defend him. So it's going to be interesting to see who lines up and to see if supporting Trump still has political currency in 2018. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. It's available on YouTube, And I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.